The history of Mongolia is a tapestry woven with the threads of warrior Khans, religious leaders, and the blend of many cultures. Among these, the story of a Tibetan Lama who became the last Khan of Mongolia is one that is particularly notable. Today's report will highlight the deep connection between Mongolia and Tibet, and we will illustrate how the influence of a Tibetan spiritual leader laid the foundation for the modern nation of Mongolia. We will also underscore the enduring cultural and religious contributions Tibet has made to Mongolia. In the early 20th century, Mongolia found itself at a crossroads. The Qing dynasty, which had ruled Mongolia for many centuries, collapsed in 1911, and with that came the opportunity for Mongolians to assert their independence. During this period, Mongolia turned to the Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, the spiritual leader of Mongolia's Buddhists, for guidance. The Jebtsundamba Khutuktu lineage was established in the 17th century as the head of the Gelugpa, or the Yellow Hat school of Tibetan Buddhism in Mongolia. This lineage was believed to be a reincarnation of Taranatha, who was a prominent Tibetan Buddhist scholar and who was an influential figure in the Chonang school of Tibetan Buddhism. The first Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, Zanabazar, was a Mongolian prince who traveled to Tibet, where he was recognized as a reincarnation and became the spiritual leader of Mongolia. Over time, the position of the Jebtsundamba Khutuktu evolved into a potent combination of religious authority and political leadership. Fast forwarding to the 8th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, who would become Mongolia's last Khan, he was born in Lhasa, Tibet in 1869. He was recognized as the reincarnation of the previous Jebtsundamba Khutuktu by the 13th Dalai Lama and enthroned in Urga, which is modern-day Ulaanbaatar, in 1874. As the Qing dynasty crumbled, the Khutuktu played a pivotal role in declaring Mongolia's independence in 1911 and was installed as the Bogd Khan, or the Holy Emperor. He became the last Khan of Mongolia, combining his role as a spiritual leader with that of a political sovereign. The Bogd Khan, despite his Tibetan birth, became a central figure in Mongolia's struggle for independence. He led the country through a very tumultuous period marked by external threats from all sides, from Chinese, Soviet, and White Russian forces. Under his leadership, Mongolia asserted its independence from China in 1911 and established a theocratic government with the Bogd Khan as the head of state. The Khan sought to maintain Mongolia's sovereignty and protect its Buddhist identity, resisting external pressures to conform to foreign political intrigues. During his rule, the Bogd Khan focused on laying the groundwork for a modern Mongolian nation-state. He introduced administrative reforms, he promoted the education of Mongolian children, and aimed to preserve Mongolia's unique culture and religion. He also worked to build diplomatic relations with other countries, particularly Russia, to secure Mongolia's independence. Although his reign was short-lived, ending with his death in 1924, the Bogd Khan's efforts laid the foundation for modern Mongolia's sovereignty and its national identity. Tibet has profoundly influenced Mongolia's culture, particularly through the spread of Buddhism. Tibetan Buddhism was actually the state religion of Mongolia in the 16th century when Altan Khan, a Mongol ruler, invited the 3rd Dalai Lama of Tibet to Mongolia, and the 3rd Dalai Lama conferred upon Altan the king of religion, and in return, the Mongolian leader recognized the Dalai Lama as the spiritual head of his people. This would mark the beginning of a close religious and cultural bond between Tibet and Mongolia. Tibetan Buddhism reshaped Mongolia's spiritual life, its architecture, its art, and its literature. Monasteries were built throughout the country, and Mongolian monks would frequently travel to Tibet for higher education. Tibetan Buddhist texts were translated into Mongolian, and a new literature emerged in the form of spiritual texts, poetry, and religious treatises. The Jebtsundamba Khutuktu lineage, established in Mongolia, embodied this fusion of Tibetan spiritual authority and Mongolian leadership. Additionally, the Mongolian language itself absorbed many Tibetan terms and concepts, particularly in religious and philosophical contexts. Mongolian religious art, like thangkas, religious paintings, statuary, and mandalas, also all drew heavily from Tibetan traditions. In essence, Tibetan Buddhism provided a shared and religious framework that helped to unify the various Mongolian tribes under a common spiritual and cultural identity. After the death of the 8th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu in 1924, Mongolia underwent significant political changes, with the rise of the Mongolian People's Republic, heavily influenced by Soviet ideology. This led to the suppression of religious practices, the closure of monasteries, and the persecution of Tibetan Buddhist monks in Mongolia. The lineage of the Jebtsundamba Khutuktu was officially discontinued, as the government aimed to eradicate all traces of theocratic rule. However, the spiritual lineage did not end. The 9th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, a Tibetan by birth also, was recognized by the 14th Dalai Lama in 1991 after Mongolia's transition from communism to democracy, and he was welcomed all those many decades later by many Mongolians who saw him as a symbol of their cultural and religious revival. His recognition marked a renewal of Tibetan Buddhist practice in Mongolia and a reassertion of the deep spiritual connection between Mongolia and Tibet. The 9th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu played a significant role in rebuilding the Buddhist community in Mongolia, promoting peace and fostering a renewed national identity grounded in spiritual traditions. In 2022, a young boy of Mongolian heritage, born in Washington, D.C., was recognized by the Dalai Lama as a 10th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, signifying a continuation of this spiritual lineage. This recognition reinforced the historical and cultural ties between Mongolia and Tibet and highlighted the enduring significance of the Jebtsundamba Khutuktu lineage to Mongolian identity. The story of Mongolia's last Han, the 8th Jebtsundamba Khutuktu, illustrates how a Tibetan Lama played a crucial role in shaping the modern nation of Mongolia. His leadership during Mongolia's struggle for independence laid the foundation for the modern nation's sovereignty and cultural identity. Tibet's profound impact on Mongolia's religious, cultural, and spiritual life through the spread of Buddhism has cemented a bond that continues to this day, reflected in the reverence for the Jebtsundamba Khutuktu lineage and its role in the spiritual and cultural revival of modern Mongolia. Thank you all so much for tuning back into Eclectic Explorations. I appreciate everyone's support. I don't care how you manifest it. I just humbly request that you continue to do so. Thank you.